In today's video, we're going to go through every single Easter egg featured in the Elder Scrolls 4 Oblivion. We're using the unofficial Elder Scrolls pages as our reference throughout this video, as it does a pretty great job at outlining everything the community has found. The categories of Easter eggs include in-game jokes, pop culture references of TV, movies, music, literature, art, and other video games/gaming, followed by societal references of culture, history, and locations. Feel free to debate in the comments what you would consider a deliberate Easter egg put into the game by Bethesda versus the possibility that these are likely more coincidental findings. If you wanted to take a look at the list of Easter eggs for yourself, the website will be linked down below. And without further ado, let's get into this list. We begin with the inner game jokes and references. Various shops in the Imperial City were created to pay homage to local restaurants in Bethesda's home state of Maryland. For example, the Main Ingredient, which is an alchemy store located in the Market District of the capital, is based off of a real-life restaurant called the Main Ingredient, which has since changed its name to Main and Market, located in Annapolis, Maryland. Another storefront in the game is called the Three Brothers Trade Goods, which is also located in the Market District. The store is in reference to Three Brothers Italian restaurant, which has various locations all around Maryland. Close to the center of the province of Cyrodiil lies a fort called Fort Nickel. Just west of the fort is a rather small lake. Exploring the banks of the lake, you're likely to come across a corpse named Nath Dyer. Not much is known about Nath Dyer, but we do see through his inventory that he did have a love interest. On Nath Dyer's person, he holds a letter which details his feelings towards an unnamed person and how he wishes to court them. He also mentions he'll give them a primrose, which he still has on his person, indicating that he never got the chance to tell or show this person how he felt. It turns out that in the construction set of the game, there are two hidden names for Nath Dyer. One is Dead Lover Fort Nickel, and the other is Nathan McDyer. It turns out Nath Dyer is shortened for the Nathan X McDyer who worked on this game as a quality assurance member. Identical to the previous entry, in the depths of Fort Cinia located far to the east of Cyrodiil, there's a deceased and lifeless skeleton named Grand Struth. Grand Struth holds the Cinia Crypt key, but more importantly, is actually a reference to a member of the World Art sect who worked on the game, Grand Struthers. While wandering past or by engaging in conversation with NPCs, we may hear this quote on the unique looking creatures called Landreg. Have you seen a Landreg? We call them billies. Don't know why. Steer clear of them though. As it turns out, we know why they call them billies. The development team had actually nicknamed the Landreg billies while the game was being created. It turns out that the term billies must have really been a hit, as they decided to keep it around through in-game dialogue. The exact interview quote goes, "The Oblivion bestiary is quite large and varied. You'll see the return of old Elder Scrolls favorites, plus the addition of more than a few new critters to smash or sneak by, whatever your preference. One of our new favorite guys we've nicknamed, codename Billy. He's a really awesome variation on a popular creature from past Elder Scrolls games." Moving on to pop culture references, we'll start off with TV and movies. There's a somewhat hidden quest in the game titled An Unexpected Voyage, which initiates as soon as our character rents a room and sleeps on the ship called the Bloated Float. Here, we're unexpectedly taken out to sea as a bandit group called the Blackwater Brigands takes over the boat. One of the dialogue options we can say to Celine, the head of the bandit group, is that we're the ship's cook. This line of dialogue is apparently in reference to the Steven Seagal movie, Under Siege, where he is indeed the ship's cook and uses the same line, among other things, while the boat has been taken over by enemy forces. The Dark Brotherhood's iconic speaker, Lucien Lachance, is supposedly based off of the character Lucien Lacroix. Lacroix is from the television show Forever Knight, which features a character named Nick Knight. Nick becomes a vampire and is welcomed into a dark family of sorts. Lucien Lacroix is the entity that welcomes Nick into said family, exactly as how Lucien Lachance welcomes us into the sinister family of the Dark Brotherhood. Umbacano is an arrogant high elf who resides in the Imperial City Talos Plaza district. We embark on a series of quests for him which surround the secrets and nature of the Ayleid, or better known as the Wild Elves. The second quest we receive from Umbacano is titled Nothing You Can Possess. The nature of this quest involves us searching for a carving in the high fane of Malada. After retrieving it, we're held up by a group of fellow treasure hunters who we once trusted. The name of this quest is in reference to the Indiana Jones movie, Raiders of the Lost Ark, and is derived from the quote of Dr. Renee Belloc. As for the whole setup, Jones was in a strikingly similar position as we are in during this quest, with Claude Merrick, our rival and nemesis, acting as the Doctor. The actual quote goes, "Dr. Jones, again we see that there is nothing you can possess which I cannot take away." While in the city of Breville, we're likely to hear rumors of the Forlorn Watchman. Pursuing more information about these rumors leads us on a quest itself titled The Forlorn Watchman. It's here we help release the spirit of a doomed sailor by gaining access onto a ship called the MMA. Whilst in the MMA, we find the ship's logbook, which contains the details of how the ship and the crew met their watery fate. Essentially, there was a mutiny on board led by someone named Gable against the captain of the ship, Captain LotR. This is supposedly in reference to a movie called Mutiny on the Bounty, in which an actor named Charles LotR played the ship's captain. There was a mutiny on board, and the leader of the treacherous act was a character played by another actor named Clark Gable. During the latter half of the Dark Brotherhood's questline, we play through a quest called Following a Lead, in which we try to seek out information and clues on who the traitor within the guild could be. This leads us to the Anvil Lighthouse cellar, where we find a horror show. The rooms are lined with corpses of both people and animals, there's blood sprayed all over the walls and floors, and the sound of flies buzzing is deafening. One of the atrocities we find down here is a severed zombified head titled Mother's Head. Revealed across multiple journal entries of the traitor's diary, they actually speak and converse with the rotting head. This is apparently in reference to Friday the 13th, Part 2, in which Jason, a deranged killer, also keeps around and speaks to the severed head of his own mother, whom was killed in the first movie. During the second quest for the Thieves Guild, titled May the Best Thief Win, we're in a competition with two other prospects to see who can steal Amantius Electus's diary first. After obtaining the diary, we may be more focused on returning it to Armand Kristoff in exchange for entrance into the guild than we would be reading it. However, if we do decide to take a look at it, it details Electus's experiments with creating a blood-drinking plant that eventually goes too far as it thirsts for human blood. It's believed that this is a reference to the movie Little Shop of Horrors, in which a florist discovers a plant that also eats people and yearns for the taste of human blood. Moving on to the music portion of pop culture. Available for equipping onto our character as clothing in the game is a pair of blue suede shoes. These offer no protection or benefit of any kind, but they do pay homage to the classic tune, Blue Suede Shoes. This is a rock and roll song written by Carl Perkins and performed by various big names in the industry, such as Jimi Hendrix, the Beatles, Elvis Presley, Johnny Cash, and of course, Perkins himself. One of Skingrad's claims to fame is its amazing vineyards located just outside of the city walls. We have Tamika's winery as well as the Surreal Brothers winery. Now, wandering around Castle Skingrad, we're likely to come across the orc butler, Shum Groyarig. Shum may make these comments about the Surreal vineyards, but I helped him drink his wine, and he always has some mighty fine wine. This line of dialogue is a direct quote from the song Joy to the World, performed by Three Dog Night. The actual lyrics go as follows: Jeremiah was a bullfrog, was a good friend of mine. I never understood a single word he said, but I helped him drink his wine, and he always had some mighty fine wine. We now move on to literature of the pop culture section. During the second last Thieves Guild quest titled Boots of Spring-Heeled Jack, we're sent by the Grey Fox himself to find the grave of the infamous thief, Spring-Heeled Jack, in search of his enchanted boots. Spoiler alert, but it turns out that Spring-Heeled Jack isn't dead after all. Well, he's not deceased dead, he's just a member of the undead, as he's now a vampire living amongst the citizens of the Imperial City and goes by the name Jack Ben, Earl of Imbel. If you were to remove the words Earl of, we would be left with Jack Ben Imbel. Spaced out and pronounced differently, we get the phrase Jack be Nimble. This is seen as a reference to the nursery rhyme, Jack be nimble, Jack be quick, Jack jump over a candlestick. On the same note, Spring-Heeled Jack is actually a reference to the English folktale entity known as Spring-Heeled Jack. Spring-Heeled Jack was known for terrorizing and scaring wanderers of the countryside in what we now know as the United Kingdom. His appearance was quite frightening, but his feats of athleticism and coordination were absolutely astonishing, similar to the enchantment and buff that we gain to our athletics when we equip the boots of Spring-Heeled Jack. On the border of the Imperial Reserve and the Great Forest, to the east of the Imperial City and south of Coral, there lies a village known as Hackdirt. This village is actually the central focus of a quest that involves us searching for a missing Argonian girl. The quest's name is A Shadow over Hackdirt, and is believed to be a direct reference to the book by H.P. Lovecraft, The Shadow over Innsmouth. The book sees the main character uncovering a cult who worships entities known as Deep Ones in a small town that has been neglected and overlooked by society. It deals with bodily transformations, human sacrifice, and mythical beings. The quest in question also deals with cult-like activities, a neglected and destroyed settlement, human/mer/beastfolk sacrifices, unknown entities, and the worshippers transforming into creature-like beings. The nail on the head for this reference is that the unknown entities in Hackdirt are also called the Deep Ones. In the city of Breville, we may come across an Argonian named Kude in the Mages Guild Hall. She asks us for our help in waking up her friend, Henentir, who is seemingly trapped inside of something called the Dream World. We enter into this Dream World scenario with him and complete a series of trials in hopes that this will give him the strength and ability to wake up from his purgatory. The quest is titled Through a Nightmare Darkly and is believed to be a reference to the King James Bible. The actual phrase comes from the first epistle to the Corinthians and is translated as, "For now, we see through a glass, darkly," which essentially refers to an imperfect vision or perspective of reality. During our time in the Dark Brotherhood Sanctuary, we receive contracts from the leader of the hall, Ochiva. One of the contracts, or in this case quests, is titled Whodunit. In Whodunit, we go to Summit Miss Manor in Skingrad and are locked inside of a mansion with 5 other people. They believe that there's gold hidden somewhere within the walls of this confine and that they can only leave once someone has found it. However, we know that they're all really here because someone put a price on their head and were to assassinate them all. It turns out that it was revealed by none other than Todd Howard himself that this quest's premise is based off of a book titled And Then There Were None, written by Agatha Christie. In this book, a group of strangers are all invited to a private island where each of them are systematically killed off by an unknown force in unique and baffling ways. In the Imperial City, upon traveling to the marketplace and speaking to a member of the society, we may hear that a new vendor in town, Thorinir, is undercutting all of the other merchants on their sales prices. This leads to the quest, Unfriendly Competition, and has us uncovering a grave-robbing ring led by a man named Agarmir. In Agarmir's basement is an essential item to this quest, a book called the Macabre Manifest. It details whom he is stolen from, the city they were buried in, and the items he took out of their graves. One of the entries in the manifest is someone by the name of Oford Gabbings. Oford Gabbings, when rearranged, is actually an anagram for Frodo Baggins, the Hobbit protagonist from the Lord of the Rings trilogy. Going even further, the manifest lists these items in Gabbings' possession. A travel cloak with silver and green leaf fastener, which is the same one Frodo had worn on his journey. An enchanted short sword with inlaid writing, referring to his blade, Sting. A gold ring with an inscription which has cursed in parentheses, referring to the One Ring. And finally, it details a leather-bound journal, which isn't as concrete as the first 3, but is likely a reference to the book, There and Back Again, which Frodo finishes for Bilbo. Most interestingly, 2 of these items can actually be acquired. The first one is the enchanted short sword with inlaid writing. This is actually Debaser, which can be looted off of a slain Agarmir. And the other item is the gold ring with the inscription, which is actually the Weatherword circlet given to us by Thorinir at the end of this quest. Continuing with our Tolkien references, during the Dark Brotherhood quest, The Coldest Sleep, we're tasked with traveling to Knoll Mountain and slaying a barbaric Nord known as Havelstein Horblood. Havelstein allegedly killed the chieftain of a mead hall and fled the scene. This prompted the deceased chieftain's sister to put a bounty on his head, and that's where we come in. If you played through the Dark Brotherhood questline, you know what's really going on here, but regardless, it isn't actually Havelstein we're focused on, it's his companion. Waiting for us at the Knoll Mountain camp, along with the Nord, is Havelstein's pet wolf, Redmaw. Redmaw is actually a reference to the text, Beren and Luthien, written by J.R.R. Tolkien. In the text, Redmaw, or better known as Karkaroth, served Morgoth, was the first werewolf, and was considered the most foul, evil, and powerful wolf within the Tolkien universe. Redmaw is translated from the Sindarin, or Elvish language, by the elements of Kar, meaning red, and Karak, meaning jaw, or Kark, meaning fang. We continue with yet another Tolkien reference, and it also relates back to the Dark Brotherhood. The very first quest we do for the Dark Brotherhood involves us going to the Inn of Ill Omen and assassinating a man named Rufio in his sleep. The quest itself is called A Knife in the Dark and is a reference to a chapter within the Fellowship of the Ring that shares the same name. Furthermore, within this chapter, the characters we follow are almost murdered in their beds while they were asleep at the local inn in the village of Bree. Right in front of the Imperial City sewers we emerge from in the beginning of the game, there lies an alien ruin called Vilverin. Vilverin has 4 different zones to it, being mostly filled with bandits and the undead. In the 4th zone, however, titled Vilverin Sel Sankramathi, we will come across a Redguard necromancer named Jalbert. Near Jalbert, on a pedestal, is a note titled Undelivered Letter. The letter details how Jalbert had to flee Daggerfall due to him having gotten caught practicing necromancy. Jalbert is writing to someone named Captain Aluccardius, and hints at them being a vampire. By taking away the letters C, I, U, and S, and then rearranging the remaining ones, we can spell out Dracula. Alternatively, if left unarranged, this could also be a reference to the vampire Alucard from the Hellsing manga series, although Alucard was likely named that way due to his affiliation with Dracula, so either way, it does lead back to the novel by Bram Stoker. The Knights of the Nine DLC was released in November of 2006 and included an additional 11 quests for the player to embark on. One of those quests is called Nature's Fury, in which we must retrieve the boots of the Crusader from the Shrine of Kinnereth, which in turn leads us to Kinnereth's Grotto. In order to gain entrance into the grotto, we must complete a trial and get past the Forest Guardian, a massive mystical brown bear. Most players, including myself, would have thought the answer was to fight and kill the Guardian in order to gain access to the grotto, but it's actually the exact opposite. We're to ignore the bear and wait for a little bit of time to pass, showing we're respecting of Kinnereth's natural creations. This premise is apparently based on the book Sword in the Storm by David Gemmell, in which a similar situation happens to the main character, Conovar. He encounters a large bear known as the Guardian that surely would have bested him in a fight, so instead, he chooses to ignore its aggression and walks around the beast to complete his task. Located near the mouth of the Panther and directly east of Fort Irony, there lies a small unnamed bridge. This bridge doesn't seem very significant at all, until we approach and get near it. Within proximity, a dead troll's body will float up to the surface. Certainly a strange occurrence, but it gets even more peculiar when we approach it and take a look at its inventory. On its body, there's a little scrawled note that reads, "Me worst troll ever. Nobody pay bridge toll. Me not scary enough. Me get drunk and kill self. Troll drown." Many believe this to be an obvious take on the troll toll and the classic tale of a troll living under the bridge. More specifically, to be reminiscent of the Three Billy Goats Gruff Norwegian fairy tale. Here, 3 goats attempt to pass a bridge and are stopped by a troll. The first 2 get past the troll by simply telling it to wait for the next goat, which is bigger and will make for a better meal. The 3rd goat is able to overpower the troll and knock it over the bridge into the water below, ultimately killing it. In total, there are 15 Daedric Shrine side quests that we can embark on within the base game. Boethiah's quest has us competing in the Tournament of the 10 Bloods, where essentially we fight the other 9 major races of Tamriel, gauntlet style, until one of us emerges victorious. Our character's race is the only one we don't compete against, so as long as you're not playing as an orc, Boethia will say this line of dialogue upon the Orsimer's defeat. Alas, poor orc, this was not your finest hour. Many believe this to be a reference to William Shakespeare's famous play, Hamlet, in which during the 5th act, scene 1, Hamlet begins speaking about the deceased jester, Yorick, and says, "Alas, poor Yorick." The Dark Brotherhood Sanctuary is home to more than a few unique characters. One of them that stands out the most is the orc, Gogran Grobalmog, as he wears advanced levels of heavy armor and explicitly states that he doesn't utilize stealth while carrying out his contracts. Oddities aside, when asking the resident Wood Elf archer, Telandril, about rumors, she will say that as a child, Gogron had a pet rabbit. However, he would use too much force while petting the critter, and one day crushed the hare's skull. This is alleged to be a reference to the novel Of Mice and Men by John Steinbeck, in which Lenny Small, a kind-hearted but brute of a man, killed a mouse and a puppy the exact same way by petting them too roughly. There aren't as many iconic scenes burned into players' minds that are quite like the tutorial of the game. Making our way through the underground prison system, getting flanked by the Mythic Dawn at every turn, witnessing the Emperor's assassination, and fleeing with the Amulet of Kings are all well regarded. Among these memorable moments would be the wise words and dialogue provided by none other than Emperor Uriel Septim VII. Close to his death scene, while discussing birth signs with him, he tells us this piece of dialogue. The skies are marked with numberless sparks, each a fire, and every one a sign. And then, on a separate occasion, when asked if he's afraid to die, he says, "Death, a necessary end, will come when it will come." These lines are based off of William Shakespeare's play, Julius Caesar. During Act 2, Scene 2, Caesar says, "Of all the wonders that I have heard, it seems to me most strange that men should fear, seeing death, a necessary end, will come when it will come." And as for the former line, during Act 3, Scene 1, Caesar says, "There is no fellow in the firmament. The skies are painted with unnumbered sparks. They are all fire, and every one doth shine. But there's but one in all doth hold his place." Coupling this with the fact that Patrick Stewart, the voice actor for Uriel Septim, has actually been a member of the Royal Shakespeare Company since 1966 makes it all even better. While loitering in the city of Breville, we're likely to be approached by a woman named Ursan Locke. Ursan tells us that her husband, Alaron, has gone missing and would like us to find out what happened. The quest revolves around us meeting with a loan shark, Curdan Grodragol, who tricks us into going to a secluded area called Fort Grief. This is in order to retrieve a family heirloom in exchange for Alarin's freedom. Here, we not only run into Alarin, but find out that we're a part of some sick hunting game. During this game, nobles pay to chase around unsuspecting citizens and brutally murder them. As it turns out, this concept was taken from a short story called The Most Dangerous Game, written by Richard Connell. In The Most Dangerous Game, a man travels to South America to hunt big cats, only to find out that he's the one being hunted on this secluded island. Maik the Liar is a Khajiit wanderer that we come across during multiple installments of the Elder Scrolls games. Maik himself is a bit of an Easter egg in that regard, but there are some pieces of dialogue that he tells us which sound quite familiar. Maik's introductory line to the player is, "Maik knows much, tells some." Many fans have been quick to point out that this line comes from the book The Moon is a Harsh Mistress, written by Robert A. Henlane. In the book, the main character Manny is speaking of his friend Mike and says the following, "Mike knows much, doesn't tell all." As mentioned previously, there are 15 Daedric Shrine quests that we can embark on in the main game. During the quest belonging to Vermina, we infiltrate Arkved's wizard tower. Arkved is a cunning wizard who stole a very powerful relic from Vermina straight out of her Daedric realm. Here, we journey through his own personal nightmare hell, fighting our way through Daedra and solving puzzles. At the end, we see Arkved in his bed, permanently asleep and forever tormented. Further showing his anguish, we find crumpled notes in the corner of his room that detail his slow, torturous descent into madness. One of them reads, blank crumpled piece of paper with a line written in trembling hand. I shall lie here in the dark, waiting for death. And the other reads, blank crumpled piece of paper with lines scratched in a trembling hand. The horror, the horror. As it turns out, these lines were actually taken from the book Heart of Darkness, written by Joseph Conrad. The exact lines are used by the character, Mr. Kurtz, and are used to show his descent to insanity after delving into the twisted parts of the human psyche. Moving on to the art section of pop culture. When traveling to the city of Coral and entering on through from the south side gate, we'll come face to face with a rather magnificent and powerful statue. It appears to be a moment of Saint Ulsa holding a dead soldier recently killed in battle. Many believe that this statue is based off of Michelangelo's La Madonna della Pietà, or Our Lady of Piety, which shows Mary holding a recently deceased Jesus. While traveling to the city of Anvil and entering inside from the northern gate, if we look to our left, we'll see a small pond with a mermaid statue at the back of it. Many fans believe that this statue is based off of the Little Mermaid statue in Copenhagen, Denmark, sculpted by Edvard Eriksson. Next, we move on to other video game and gaming references. One of these smaller DLCs for Oblivion is the Fighter Stronghold plugin, in which it adds Battlehorn Castle to the game. This is a settlement west of Coral. There's plenty to do and see within the castle, however, one of the hidden quests and storylines within describes how the previous lord of the castle, Lord Cain, was turned into an undead by the diabolical necromancer Ariel Gerard. As it turns out, this story mimics that of Crystal Dynamics' Legacy of Cain. Cain is also a nobleman and was brought back from the dead by the necromancer Mortanius. Each major city has at least 2 beggars in it. These beggars are especially helpful during our time in the Thieves Guild, as they're jam-packed with information on the local gossip and rumors. After exiting the conversation with a beggar, they often say, "Blessings of insert divine's name here upon ye." Well, interestingly, sometimes we may hear them say, "Blessings of Mystara upon ye." Mystara may not sound so familiar, and there's a reason for that. This is apparently a reference to the Dungeons & Dragons campaign world known as Mystara, which was considered the default version of the role-playing game. The Fighters Guild halls throughout Cyrodiil house many different members of the faction. Most we don't get to interact with, but if we did go out of our way to do so, we actually get some interesting dialogue from specifically the male Imperials. When engaged in conversation, they may say the line, "I have a warm place to sleep and 3 squares a day. It ain't the Bard's Tale, but it's good enough for me." Many fans believe this is a direct reference to the video game series The Bard's Tale, which is derived from the role-playing game The Bard's Tale, which came out in 1985. Some of the most memorable dialogue pieces from the game come from facing foes like bandits, marauders, vampires, or just plain NPCs, as they say iconic lines like "Die, cur," or "This is the part where you fall down and bleed to death." Another fantastic line is "Jump on my sword while you can," and many believe this to be a reference to the video game Baldur's Gate 2: Shadows of Am. In the game, a character known as Minsk will say the line, "Jump on my sword while you can, evil, I won't be as gentle." Next, we move away from pop culture and get into the societal references of the game, starting with culture. Previously discussed was the Dark Brotherhood quest, Whodunit, where we travel to Summit Miss Manor in Skingrad and systematically eliminate 5 unsuspecting targets. Before we step inside of the home, however, we're greeted at the door by a Nord keymaster and doorman named Fafnir. Fafnir tells us he won't let anyone out until the killings are completed. As it turns out, in Nordic mythology, Fafnir is the name of a greedy, gold-craving dragon who guards treasure coming from the Volsunga saga, which is an Old Norse account dating all the way back to the 13th century. Even though almost all of the Daedric princes have a shrine quest within the game, some of them have other quests dedicated to them as well. For example, in the city of Leeuwin, a woman named Rosentia Galenis acquires a magical staff that was actually cursed by Sheogorath. The Staff of Everscamp, as it's called, curses the owner by simply spawning in 4 troublesome scamps that can't be gotten rid of. We must take the staff off of her and place it at a hidden shrine of Sheogorath deep within Dark Fathom Cave. Now, the name of this quest is titled Whom Gods Annoy, and apparently it's based off of an ancient proverb from an anonymous Greek philosopher. The proverb reads, "Whom the gods destroy, they first make mad." Next, we move on to the historical references. We've already spoken of Gogrongro Balmog of the Dark Brotherhood and his ties to literature, but there's actually another person within the Dark Brotherhood sanctuary who was designed based off of external influences. Antoinette Marie is a Breton assassin who practically shares the same name as Marie Antoinette, the Queen of France in the 18th century, whose head was chopped off during the French Revolution. To make matters more interesting, while speaking with Antoinette, she may say she believes she's next in line to be in charge of the Sanctuary Hall. While wandering around the city of Bruma, we may find ourselves heading into the general store called Nova Roma for a restock on supplies. Many believe Nova Roma is a play on the Roman capital, Constantinople, which was originally named Nova Roma by Emperor Constantine the Great in the year 324. Alternatively, the unofficial pages also suggests that it could be a reference to Nova Roma, the Roman revivalist group which was founded in 1988. As we progress through the Dark Brotherhood questline and story, we hear about and even become a member of the Black Hand, the guild's most trusted and high-ranking inner circle. The Black Hand has large amounts of control over the rest of the guild and the way it functions. Many believe that the Black Hand's name was inspired by the real-world Serbian military organization that shares the same name. The organization dealt with assassinating figureheads and other members of society, such as Archduke Franz Ferdinand, which ultimately ended up sparking the First World War. Next, we move on to the different location references. One of the more intricate and fleshed out major cities within Cyrodiil is that of Skingrad. Skingrad's cobblestone layout, combined with its division of the east and west sides, along with the separation of its castle, makes it one of the more medieval feeling settings within the game. Taking a closer look at the castle, to some it almost might look familiar, and that's because it's believed to be based off of Bran Castle in Romania, or as it's nicknamed, Dracula Castle. This seems very fitting due to the Count of Skingrad's true nature. And finally, for the last Easter egg on this list, north of the Imperial City, and involved in the side quest, Zero Visibility, we have the old ruins of Fort Caractacus. Many fans believe that this name was inspired by the British chieftain, Caractacus, who lived in the 1st century and is famous for his wartime accomplishments, along with his speech which ultimately spared him from execution by Emperor Claudius. That wraps up our list of Easter eggs in the Elder Scrolls 4 Oblivion. Again, all of these were compiled on the unofficial Elder Scrolls pages and were verified by the community itself. As mentioned before, feel free to discuss which entries you feel were certainly purposeful placements by Bethesda and which ones might be more loose coincidences. If you really enjoy this topic, there's actually a whole page dedicated to unverified Easter eggs over on the unofficial pages, which could make for a fun video to cover as well. Until next time, keep on adventuring.